The hardware store's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Marcus reached for a box of screws. His daughter Aaliyah tugging at his sleeve when a small voice cut through the aisle chatter. Clear, curious, impossible. "Hello, sir. My mother has a tattoo just like yours." Marcus froze, the box slipping from his fingers. The Phoenix design on his wrist wasn't from any shop. He and one person had sketched it together 10 years ago. The night before, she vanished without explanation. The little girl stood there, maybe 9 years old, pointing at his exposed wrist with the kind of certainty that makes grown men's heart stop. And her eyes were Aaliyah's exact shade of green. Behind her, footsteps approached, expensive heels clicking against linoleum, with the rhythm of everything Marcus had buried rising back to the surface. And he knew before he turned around that his carefully rebuilt life was about to crack wide open. Because some tattoos don't just mark skin, they mark the moment everything you thought you knew becomes a lie. And this child, with his dead wife's eyes and a stranger's face, was pointing at proof that the past never stays buried. What happens when the truth you've been running from walks up to you in a hardware store and calls you sir? The sawdust clung to Marcus's jeans as he knelt beside Aaliyah in the lumber section, measuring a 2-way 4 for the treehouse they'd been planning since spring. The afternoon sunlight cut through the high windows of Johnson Hardware, illuminating dust motes that danced like memories he'd learned to keep at bay. Aaliyah hummed tunelessly the way her mother used to when concentrating. And Marcus felt the familiar ache settle behind his ribs. 2 years since cancer had taken Denise. 2 years of learning to be both parents at once. The Phoenix tattoo on his wrist caught the light against his dark skin as he marked the wood, its wings spread in eternal flight, and he pulled his sleeve down out of habit. Some things weren't meant for explaining to 8-year-olds. Not yet. The design had been his and someone else's secret once, sketched on a napkin in a coffee shop when he was 26, and stupid enough to believe love conquered geography and ambition. Then she'd left for New York with promises that dissolved like sugar and rain. And he'd met Denise at the church fundraiser, built a life, learned what real love actually meant. Steady hands and hospital vigils, and the sound of a child's laughter filling rooms that used to echo. Aaliyah tugged his sleeve, her small braided hair bouncing as she moved. "Dad, that girl staring at us." Marcus glanced up to see a child near the paint samples, maybe a year older than Aaliyah, with dark curls escaping a velvet headband that probably cost more than his grocery bill. She wore a navy dress with white collar, the kind of outfit that screamed private school and trust funds, and she was indeed staring at them with an intensity that made Marcus uncomfortable. He offered a polite smile and turned back to his measurements, but Aaliyah was already waving. "Hi, I'm Aaliyah. Do you need help finding something?" The girl took 3 careful steps forward, her patent leather shoes silent on the concrete floor, and Marcus noticed the way she held herself. Shoulders back, chin up, like someone had taught her. Posture mattered. "Hello," she said, her voice carrying the careful enunciation of expensive education. "My name is—" She paused, glanced toward the front of the store, then continued. "My name is Zara." There was something rehearsed about it, as if she'd practiced introductions in a mirror. Aaliyah, never one for formality, grabbed Marcus's arm and pulled him to standing. "This is my dad. He's building me a tree house." "Do you have a tree house?" Zara shook her head slowly, and for a moment something vulnerable crossed her features. The universal look of childhood loneliness that transcended tax brackets. "We have a garden, but no trees strong enough. Mother says they're still too young." Her eyes drifted to Marcus's wrist, where his sleeve had ridden up again during the motion of standing, and she went very still. The fluorescent lights hummed their monotonous song. Someone dropped a can of paint 3 aisles over, the clatter sharp in the hardware cathedral. Zara took another step closer, her gaze fixed on the Phoenix, and Marcus felt time slow down in that peculiar way it does before everything changes. "Hello, sir," she said, her voice smaller now, uncertain. "My mother has a tattoo just like yours. The box of screws hit the floor, ball bearings scattering across concrete like his thoughts. Marcus heard Aaliyah's surprised gasp, felt his daughter's hand on his elbow, but his entire focus had narrowed to this child, and the impossible words hanging in the air between them. "What did you say?" His voice came out rougher than intended. Zara pointed at his wrist with one delicate finger. "The bird, the phoenix with the broken wing that learned to fly. Mother has the same one on her shoulder. She never shows anyone, but I saw it once when she was changing. She told me it was from a long time ago from someone." She footsteps rapid now, expensive heels clicking an urgent rhythm. "Zara, where did you?" The voice cut off mid-sentence, and Marcus knew it before he turned. Some sounds burrow into your bones and wait there dormant, until circumstance resurrects them. He turned slowly, the world narrowing to a pinpoint, and there she was. 10 years had refined her sharp edges into something almost dangerous. The ratty art student with paint-stained fingers had become a woman in a charcoal suit that probably cost what he made in a month. Her dark hair was shorter now, cut in a severe bob that framed cheekbones he'd once traced with reverent fingers. But her eyes, those hadn't changed. Still that particular shade of gray that reminded him of October skies before rain. They were wide now, trapped between recognition and terror. Marcus. His name left her lips like a confession, like a curse, like the final word of a prayer she'd been reciting for a decade. Simone. He tasted her name after 10 years of not speaking it, and it felt like touching a scar that had never properly healed. Aaliyah pressed closer to his side, confused by the tension that had turned the air thick and hard to breathe. Zara looked between them, her small face creased with the kind of worry children get when they sense adult complications beyond their comprehension. Simone recovered first, her features smoothing into a mask of polite distance. "I apologize, Zara. We need to leave now." But Zara was looking at the tattoo again, then at her mother. Then back to Marcus with the dawning wonder of a child, piecing together a puzzle adults thought they'd hidden. "Is he the one from your story? The one about the phoenix who found another phoenix, and they learned to fly together before the storm came?" Simone's face went pale, and Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. "What story?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. But Simone was already taking Zara's hand, already turning away. "I'm sorry. We have to go. I'm sorry." She moved toward the exit with the desperate grace of someone fleeing a crime scene, pulling Zara along. But the girl looked back over her shoulder, and Marcus saw it clearly now. The shape of her nose, the way her eyebrows arched, the stubborn set of her jaw that he recognized from every morning, he looked in the mirror to shave his brown face. Aaliyah's voice was small beside him. "Dad, who was that lady? Why did she run away?" Marcus couldn't answer. He was too busy calculating months, counting backwards, remembering the last night he'd spent with Simone before she disappeared. The hotel room, the rain against windows, the promises they'd made about calling, about making it work despite the distance. 9 months. Zara was 9 years old. The math was simple. The implications were apocalyptic. Marcus moved through the next 3 days in a fog, his hands performing familiar tasks, while his mind spun in useless circles. He finished the treehouse measurements, guided Aaliyah through her homework, prepared meals. He barely tasted all while that moment in the hardware store played on repeat behind his eyes. The way Simone had looked at him, not with the hatred of an ex-lover or the indifference of true distance, but with something that looked remarkably like grief mixed with fear. And Zara, sweet Zara, with her careful posture and her mother's eyes and his jawline, asking about Phoenix's learning to fly. He tried to work, taking on a custom cabinet project that required his full concentration, but his calloused hands kept fumbling measurements he could normally make in his sleep. The problem was the not knowing. If Zara was his daughter and every cell in his body screamed that she was, why had Simone kept it secret? Why disappear completely instead of telling him? He'd loved her once. Loved her with the kind of intensity that feels like drowning and flying simultaneously. When she left for that prestigious art gallery position in New York, he'd offered to follow. She'd said no, said his life was here. His family business was here. She couldn't ask him to abandon it. 3 weeks later, she'd stopped answering his calls, blocked his number, vanished so completely it was like she'd never existed at all. So he'd done what people do. He'd grieved. He'd moved on. He'd met Denise at a woodworking exhibition where she'd admired a rocking chair he'd made. And they'd talked for 3 hours about everything and nothing. Denise had been steady where Simone was storm, present where Simone was always half gone, and Marcus had built a good life with her, a real life. Aaliyah had arrived 2 years into their marriage. All red-faced determination and perfect fingers, and Marcus had understood for the first time what his father meant about love that grounds you instead of unmooring you. Denise's cancer diagnosis came when Aaliyah was 4. The doctors gave her 5 years and she fought for 6, refused to waste a single day on bitterness or why me questions. She'd made him promise to live after she was gone, to not let grief turn him into a ghost in his own house. He'd kept that promise mostly, but now this. Now Simone and a 9-year-old girl with his face and a story about phoenixes. Aaliyah found him in his workshop on the 3rd night, sitting on the floor with an unfinished drawer in his lap and tears he hadn't realized he was crying sliding down his face. She climbed into his lap without asking, 8 years old and already wise enough to know when silence was the only gift that mattered. They sat like that for a long time, the smell of cedar and old varnish surrounding them until Aaliyah finally spoke. "I liked that girl, Zara. She seemed lonely." Marcus's throat was too tight for words, so he just nodded. "Do you think we'll see her again?" Aaliyah continued, her voice thoughtful. "I hope so. I've always wanted a sister." The words hit him like a physical blow, and he had to close his eyes against the surge of emotion. Aaliyah couldn't know. Nobody knew. But children had a way of seeing truths. Adults tried to hide, and Aaliyah had always been particularly perceptive. "Baby," he managed finally, his voice rough. "Life doesn't always give us what we want." Aaliyah leaned back to look at him, her green eyes, Denise's eyes, serious. "Mommy used to say that sometimes life gives us what we need instead, but we have to be brave enough to see it." The discovery came accidentally on Saturday morning. Marcus was at the farmer's market with Aaliyah buying tomatoes for the sauce Denise had taught him to make when he saw her. Simone in jeans and a simple white shirt that probably still cost more than his entire outfit, examining heirloom vegetables with the same intense focus she used to apply to her paintings. No Zara in sight. Marcus's feet were moving before his brain caught up, Aaliyah's hand in his as they navigated between stalls selling honey and handmade soap. "Aaliyah, go look at those pastries for a second, okay? Pick one out for later." He pressed a 10 into her hand and watched her bounce toward the bakery stall before turning back to where Simone stood, frozen by the tomatoes, her eyes closed like she was praying for a different outcome. "We need to talk," Marcus said quietly. Simone's eyes opened and he was struck again by the grief in them. Old grief that had calcified into something permanent. "There's nothing to talk about." Her voice was steady, but her hands shook as she placed a tomato back in its basket. "Marcus, please just let this go. Let it go." The words came out sharper than intended, and an elderly woman at the next stall glanced over with interest. Marcus lowered his voice. "Simone. She looks exactly like me. Exactly. And you run away the second we meet. You don't think I deserve an explanation?" Simone's face was a mask, but he saw the muscles in her jaw working. "What do you want me to say?" Marcus wanted to grab her shoulders, shake her, make her look at him properly. Instead, he kept his hands at his sides, fisted so tight his nails bit into palms. "I want you to tell me the truth. Is Zara mine?" The question hung between them like smoke, and for a moment, Marcus thought she might actually answer. Then her expression shuttered completely, and when she spoke, Her voice carried the flat effect of someone reciting lines. No, she's not. And even if she were, what difference would it make? You have your life, Marcus. I have mine. We're strangers who happen to shop at the same hardware store. That's all. She moved to walk past him, but Marcus stepped into her path, desperate now. The tattoo, Simone. She knows about the tattoo. She told me you told her a story about phoenixes learning to fly together. Something cracked in Simone's facade just for a second. A flash of such raw pain that Marcus physically felt it. I need you to leave us alone, she whispered. And her voice was breaking now, the careful control dissolving. Please, Marcus, I'm begging you. You don't understand what's at stake here. Before he could respond, Aaliyah's voice rang out bright and clear. Dad! Dad! Look who I found! Marcus's heart stopped. Aaliyah was walking toward them, hand in hand with Zara. Both girls carrying paper bags of pastries and wearing matching grins. Zara, I can't believe you're here. Her nanny brought her to get bread. Can she come play at our house, please? Zara was looking up at Simone with such hopeful eyes that Marcus felt his chest constrict. Mother, can I? Aaliyah says, they're building a treehouse and I could help. Simone looked between the two girls. And Marcus watched 10 years of carefully constructed walls crumble in real time. Her shoulders sagged. Her breath came shorter. When she met his eyes, he saw surrender there mixed with terror and something that might have been relief. 1 hour, she said finally, her voice barely audible. You can visit for 1 hour and then Catherine comes to get you. Zara let out a whoop of delight that sounded so much like Aaliyah it was almost painful. As the girls ran ahead toward Marcus's truck, chattering about tree houses and whether pink or purple paint was better, Simone grabbed his arm. Her fingers were cold, even in the warm morning. Marcus! She stopped, swallowed hard, tried again. There are things you don't know, things I can't explain. But please, please be careful with her. She's fragile, more than she seems. Marcus studied her face, seeing the shadows under her eyes, the fine lines that hadn't been there a decade ago, the weight of secrets that had carved themselves into her features. I need to know the truth, Simone. Whatever it is, whatever happened, I need to know. She held his gaze for a long moment, and he saw her wearing with herself, saw the moment she made a decision. Come to my house tonight after the girls are asleep. I'll tell you everything. She pulled out a business card, thick, expensive cardstock that read, Simone Hartley, Curator Hartley Foundation, and wrote an address on the back. Adaka, come alone. The hour with the girls was simultaneously wonderful and agonizing. Aaliyah and Zara clicked immediately, their laughter filling the backyard as they helped Marcus measure lumber for the treehouse platform. Zara had clearly never used a hammer before, but she approached each nail with the serious concentration of someone used to mastering difficult things through sheer determination. She asked careful questions about measurements and weight distribution, her vocabulary far more advanced than Aaliyah's. But when Aaliyah showed her how to draw plans in the dirt with a stick, Zara's face lit up with unguarded joy. Marcus watched them together and felt something fundamental shift in his chest. They could have been sisters, moved the same way, tilted their heads at the same angle when thinking. Aaliyah with her neat cornrows and warm brown skin that glowed in the sunlight, Zara with her looser curls and lighter complexion, like Simone. But underneath the surface differences, the architecture was identical. The shape of their hands, the way they both bit their lower lip when concentrating, the stubborn set of their shoulders. When Catherine arrived, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, who introduced herself as Zara's nanny and shot Marcus a look that said she'd memorized his face for a future police lineup. Zara hugged Aaliyah goodbye with the fierce desperation of someone who'd found water in a desert and was being forced to leave it behind. "Can we do this again?" she asked, looking between Aaliyah and Marcus with such hope it hurt. Aaliyah answered before Marcus could. "Yes. Tomorrow we can work on the treehouse every day until it's done. Zara's smile could have lit cities. The address Simone had given him led to a neighborhood Marcus had only ever driven through on his way to somewhere else. The kind of place where houses hid behind stone walls and ancient trees, where money wasn't flaunted because it didn't need to be. The gate opened at his approach, clearly expecting him, and Marcus followed a winding drive to a modern masterpiece of glass and steel that probably graced architecture magazines. This wasn't art gallery curator money. This was something else entirely. Simone answered the door herself, barefoot in jeans and an oversized sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders in a way that made Marcus's chest ache with sense memory. She looked younger like this, closer to the girl he'd known. "Come in," she said quietly, stepping aside to let him enter a foyer that was more art gallery than home. Soaring ceilings, carefully curated paintings, sculpture that probably cost more than his house. "Zara is asleep?" Marcus asked, and Simone nodded. "Her room's on the 3rd floor. She won't hear us." She led him through the house to a study lined with books, poured them both whiskey from a crystal decanter without asking if he wanted it, and handed him a glass with shaking hands. They stood like that for a moment, not quite facing each other, while the weight of 10 years pressed down on the space between them. "Her name is Zara Hartley," Simone began, her voice flat with the careful control of someone who'd rehearsed this. "She's 9 years old. She was born on March 14th at Presbyterian Hospital in New York City. She likes art and mathematics, plays violin at a pre-conservatory level, speaks 3 languages, and has never had a birthday party with more than 2 other children present." Marcus waited, knowing there was more. Simone took a long drink of her whiskey and continued. "She's also never met her father, has no idea who he is, and I've spent 9 years making sure it stays that way." The words were meant to hurt, and they did, but Marcus pushed past the pain. Why? It was the only question that mattered. Simone finally turned to face him, and the raw anguish in her expression made him take an involuntary step forward. "Because telling you would have destroyed everything you had. Because I left to give you a chance at a real life, not the half-existence I could offer you." She set down her glass and wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking very small in the oversized sweater. "I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks after I left. I was in New York starting the gallery job, and I took a test in a convenience store bathroom at 2 in the morning because I couldn't sleep and kept throwing up and couldn't keep pretending it was stress." Her voice cracked and she paused to collect herself. "I sat on that dirty floor with the plastic stick in my hand, and I thought about calling you. God, Marcus, I thought about it for days. I had my phone out 100 times. But then I did what I always do. I researched. I looked you up online, checked your social media, and that's when I saw it." She met his eyes, and hers were swimming now. "You were engaged to Denise. You'd posted photos from a dinner where you proposed. You look so happy, Marcus. So fundamentally at peace in a way you never looked with me." Marcus felt like the floor had dropped away. "You were pregnant with my child, and you didn't tell me because I'd moved on." The anger in his voice was sharp, but underneath it was something much more complicated. Simone laughed, but it was bitter. Not just moved on. You'd found what you needed. Denise was God. Even in those photos, I could see she was steady, present, everything I wasn't. I was chaos, Marcus. I was ambition and restlessness. And I would have pulled you away from your family, your business, everything that grounded you. And for what? A relationship that was already falling apart before I left. "Marcus, I can't believe you're here. Her nanny brought her to get bread. Can she come play at our house, please?" Zara was looking up at Simone with such hopeful eyes that Marcus felt his chest constrict. "Mother, can I?" Aaliyah says. "They're building a tree house, and I could help." Simone looked between the two girls, and Marcus watched 10 years of carefully constructed walls crumble in real time. Her shoulders sagged. Her breath came shorter. When she met his eyes, he saw surrender there mixed with terror and something that might have been relief. "1 hour," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "You can visit for 1 hour and then Catherine comes to get you." Zara let out a whoop of delight that sounded so much like Aaliyah, it was almost painful. As the girls ran ahead toward Marcus's truck, chattering about tree houses and whether pink or purple paint was better, Simone grabbed his arm. Her fingers were cold, even in the warm morning. "Marcus, She stopped, swallowed hard, tried again. "There are things you don't know, things I can't explain, but please, please be careful with her. She's fragile, more than she seems." Marcus studied her face, seeing the shadows under her eyes, the fine lines that hadn't been there a decade ago, the weight of secrets that had carved themselves into her features. "I need to know the truth, Simone. Whatever it is, whatever happened, I need to know." She held his gaze for a long moment, and he saw her wearing with herself, saw the moment she made a decision. "Come to my house tonight after the girls are asleep. I'll tell you everything." She pulled out a business card, thick, expensive cardstock that read Simone Hartley, Curator Hartley Foundation, and wrote an address on the back. 8, come alone. Story continues with the same content pattern through to the end. Something we should have told you before, but He looked at Simone, saw her nod encouragingly, continued. "We made some mistakes a long time ago, and we're trying to fix them now." Aaliyah's eyes were wide. "What kind of mistakes?" Marcus took a breath. There was no easy way to say this. "Aaliyah, you know how you've always said you wished you had a sister?" His daughter nodded slowly. "Well, the thing is, you do. You have a sister. Zara is your sister." The silence that followed was absolute. Aaliyah looked at Zara, then at Marcus, then at Simone, her 8-year-old mind working through the implications. Zara had gone very still, her expression unreadable in a way that reminded Marcus painfully of Simone. "I don't understand," Aaliyah said finally. "How can Zara be my sister? She has a different mom." This was the hard part. Marcus glanced at Simone, who nodded and took over. "Zara, honey, do you remember the stories I told you about your father? About the kind man who liked building things?" Zara nodded slowly, and Marcus saw hope kindling in her eyes. "Dangerous and bright. The man I told you about. He's Marcus, Aaliyah's dad. He's your father, too." The words hung in the air like smoke. Zara's face went through a series of rapid changes. Confusion, hope, disbelief, and finally a desperate kind of joy that made Marcus's chest constrict. "You're my dad?" she whispered, looking at him with such naked longing it hurt. "You're the one from the stories?" Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. Zara launched herself off the couch and into his arms with the force of 9 years of wanting, and Marcus caught her, held her, felt her small body shaking with sobs against his chest. "I knew it," she gasped between tears. "I knew when I saw the tattoo. I knew you were him. Mother, I knew." Aaliyah was crying too, and Simone pulled her into a hug, while Aaliyah's mind caught up to the revelation. "So Zara is my sister?" she asked through tears. "My real sister?" Simone smiled despite her own tears. "Yes, sweetheart, your real sister." Aaliyah looked at Zara, still clinging to Marcus, and a grin broke across her face. "I have a sister. I told you I always wanted a sister." The joy in her voice was so pure, so uncomplicated by adult concerns about timing and past mistakes, that Marcus felt something tight in his chest finally loosen. Zara pulled back from Marcus's chest enough to look at Aaliyah, her face blotchy and tear-stained, but radiant. "I have a sister, too, and a dad. I have a family." The way she said it with wonder and disbelief and fierce determination, like she was claiming something she'd fight to keep, broke something in Marcus. He reached out and pulled Aaliyah into the embrace too, both his daughters in his arms, and looked up to find Simone watching them with an expression that was equal parts grief and relief. "Come here," he said softly, and after a moment's hesitation, she joined them, completing the circle. They sat like that on the floor of Marcus's living room, 4 people learning how to be a family in the wreckage of old mistakes and found truths. while outside the treehouse waited to be finished, and summer stretched endlessly ahead, and everything impossible suddenly felt within reach. The questions came later, of course. Aaliyah wanted to know why she hadn't known about Zara before. Why Simone had kept it secret, why grown-ups were so complicated. Zara wanted to know everything about Marcus. His favorite color, his favorite food, what he was like as a kid. Could she call him Dad? Or was that too soon? Could she really stay here whenever she wanted now? They answered as honestly as they could, stumbling over explanations about adult choices and difficult situations, and the girls listened with the gravity of children who understand more than they should. In the end, Aaliyah summed it up with the kind of clarity only an 8-year-old could muster. So, you guys messed up, but now you're fixing it. And the important thing is, we're all together now, right? Marcus had to laugh despite the tears on his face. Yeah, baby. That's exactly right. The months that followed were a complicated dance of building something new from broken pieces. Simone hired lawyers to establish formal custody arrangements, insisting Marcus have full legal recognition as Zara's father. Marcus sold a major piece, a custom dining set that got featured in a home magazine, and put the money toward a college fund for Zara, matching the one he'd started for Aaliyah years ago. They had family dinners twice a week. Awkward at first, but growing easier as they learned each other's rhythms. Zara started calling Marcus Dad with only slight hesitation, and the first time she said it naturally, asking him to pass the potatoes at dinner. He had to excuse himself to cry in the bathroom. Aaliyah and Zara became inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and developing the kind of twin language that siblings create. They fought sometimes petty arguments about whose turn it was to pick the movie or who got the window seat in Marcus's truck. And Marcus treasured those fights because they were so beautifully normal. Simone surprised everyone by announcing she was opening a second gallery location in town, something small and personal that she could manage herself instead of through the foundation. "I've spent 9 years in New York building walls," she told Marcus over coffee one morning. "Maybe it's time to try building something else." She bought a renovated warehouse near Marcus's workshop, close enough that Zara could walk to his studio after school if she wanted. The proximity felt intentional, like Simone was trying to make up for years of distance by eliminating geography from the equation. Marcus appreciated it, even if having his ex-girlfriend, now co-parent, nearby sometimes felt surreal. They were finding their way to friendship, or something like it. The kind of relationship built on shared responsibility and hard-won honesty rather than romance. It wasn't what they'd been, but it was real in a way their old relationship had never quite managed. On the first anniversary of the hardware store meeting, Marcus finished the treehouse. It had taken longer than planned, but he'd added features as he went. A rope ladder Zara could climb, a pulley system for lifting supplies, carved initials for both girls in the support beams, a weatherproof box for their treasures. The girls declared it perfect and immediately claimed it as their fortress, hanging a sign that read, "Aaliyah and Zara's Castle." No adults except Dad. That made Marcus laugh and ache simultaneously. That evening, after the girls had fallen asleep in the treehouse, despite Catherine's protests about proper beds, Marcus and Simone sat on his back porch with beers and comfortable silence. "Thank you," she said finally, "for not hating me, for giving Zara what I couldn't." Marcus considered that. "You gave her everything that mattered. You kept her safe. You raised an incredible kid." "Yeah, I wish you'd told me sooner. But I also know why you didn't. We were both protecting the people we loved the best way we knew how." Simone was quiet for a moment, then asked the question that had been hanging between them since that first conversation in her study. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd told you back then when I first found out?" Marcus did wonder. Sometimes late at night when he couldn't sleep, he'd play out those alternate timelines, leaving Denise, trying to make it work with Simone, splitting his life between two families. None of those scenarios felt right. "I think," he said slowly, "that we got here the long way around, made a mess of things, hurt each other and ourselves, and probably traumatized our kids in ways we won't know about until they're in therapy in their 20s. Simone laughed despite herself, but Marcus continued, "We're here now. Both girls are happy. They have each other. We're figuring it out. Maybe that's enough." Simone smiled. And it was the first completely unguarded expression he'd seen from her since she'd walked back into his life. "Maybe it is," she agreed. In the treehouse above them, Aaliyah and Zara slept tangled together in sleeping bags, their breathing synchronized, their hands loosely clasped, even in sleep. Two girls who'd found each other despite every obstacle their parents had placed in the way. Who'd known before anyone told them that they were meant to be sisters, who'd taken the complicated mess of adult mistakes and transformed it into something simple and true. They'd wake up at dawn, climb down for pancakes, and spend the day doing exactly what children should, building forts and telling stories and believing in the impossible. And their parents, flawed and trying and finally honest, would watch over them and be grateful for hardware stores and Phoenix tattoos and little girls brave enough to point at truth when they saw it. Some families are born, some are made, and some are torn apart and reassembled by the sheer force of love refusing to stay buried. By children who see past the walls adults build. By the stubborn insistence that it's never too late to tell the truth and begin again. The phoenix on Marcus's wrist caught the last rays of sunset, its wings spread in flight, and he thought about the matching one on Simone's shoulder, how they designed them together when they were young and stupid and thought matching tattoos meant forever. They'd been wrong about forever, but maybe they'd been right about phoenixes, about burning down and rising again, about learning to fly even with broken wings, about finding your way back to where you belonged, even if the path was longer and harder than it should have been. In the treehouse, Zara stirred in her sleep and murmured something that sounded like Dad. And Marcus felt his heart expand with the kind of love that hurts because it's too big for one person's chest to contain. This was his family now, messy and complicated and not at all what he'd planned, but real. So beautifully, impossibly real. And that was more than enough.